Today, I've been given the task of speaking about the principle of Ujima, collective work and responsibility. The young lady did such a great job explaining what it meant, but I'm going to repeat a little bit of what she said. It means to build and maintain our community together and to make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together. According to Dr. Karenga, Ujima as principle and practice also means that we accept the fact that we are collectively responsible for our failures and setbacks as well as our victories and achievements. The principle of collective work and responsibility also points to the fact that African freedom is indivisible. It shelters the assumption that as long as any African anywhere is oppressed, exploited, enslaved, or wounded in any way in his or her humanity, all African people are. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. According to an article in the Atlanta Free Press, the purpose of this day is to focus on ways to build and maintain our community as a collective force. It also represents the recognition and respect of the idea that without our collective work and struggle, progress is impossible and liberation is unthinkable. Moreover, there is need and obligation for us as self-conscious and committed people to shape our future with our own minds so together we can endure the hardships and also share the benefits of our struggle together. Quoting the words of Frederick Douglass, there is no progress without struggle. Another source says the Ujima principle teaches each family member to recognize that their own well-being is derived from their family and community's well-being, and that they must be concerned with the overall health of their family and community, and that the lives of each family member and that of the community are bound together. Like the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. So how do we, or how are we putting this principle into practice? Before I tackle this question, I think it is important to note that one of the common themes throughout this principle of Ujima and all of its definitions and interpretations is the word community. The dictionary defines community as a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common, or a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. I came across the words of Professor Vincent Harding, who was a very good friend of Dr. Martin Luther King. He made a speech in 1988 at the University of Virginia where he articulated a very expansive definition of community. He defined community as a way of being, a way of human beings relating to each other, the coming together of human beings in such a way that they may enhance their mutual humanness beyond the point to which it has now come. Community is a way of being among humans and at times non-humans, such as to integrate the meaning of our past, our present, and our future together. So how do you define community? What is your way of being? How do you relate to others in a way to enhance their humanness? Does the word community today mean the same thing as it did in 1966 when Kwanzaa was created, or does it mean something different? Do we all have to have the same concept of community in order to put Ujima into practice? I'll let you answer that question. For example, when I think about community, however, I automatically think about where I came from. I think about the people in Paterson and the neighborhoods where I grew up. I think about the people I went to school with, which for me were mainly African Americans. I also think about my life as an adult, my affiliations, my professional relationships, in essence, how I relate to others and my way of being among humans. Today, you have African Americans that may not have grown up in an environment dominated by African Americans, that may not even be able to relate to some of the things that I can relate to in my background. Their notion of community may be entirely different from mine. So again, can we all have different notions of community and still successfully carry out the principle of Ujima in today's world in a way that it was originally intended? And what about the notion of making our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together? Let's talk about that. How do we do that in an increasingly narcissistic, selfie-obsessed, opportunistic world, due in large part by the proliferation of social media, where a lot of people today are more interested in self-promotion and boastfulness coupled with delusions of grandeur? How do we do this when we have so many people who are ruled by jealousy and envy? I came across this blog by a black woman. It's called Simply Shanika. She said this: some women compete with each other because of a deeply rooted insecurity about themselves. Instead of being happy for another woman, she showcases how truly jealous and insecure she is through her cattiness and by trying to prove that she is actually better than the woman she hates. Women often seem to be competing with each other, she says. There seems to be an apparent need to elevate our self-esteem by bringing down other women who have done nothing personal against us or whom we haven't met, often pitting themselves against one another rather than lifting each other up. Sometimes Black women are each other's biggest critics. We are quickest to bring each other down, find each other's faults, and nitpick at a sister until she has nothing left, nothing to give, and then we step over her and call her worthless. When we have people in our community that feel this way, how do we make our brothers and sisters' problems our problem and work to resolve it or work to solve it? How do we do this when you have people who actually relish in other people's misfortunes? You've heard the saying, misery loves company. Or you have people in the community who claim to be praying for you, praying for your upliftment, when they are really hoping for your downfall. There are some people who like to see other people suffer and struggle because it makes them feel better about themselves. The actress Gabrielle Union, a beautiful, intelligent, and successful woman in her own right, made a speech in June of 2013 when she was receiving the Fierce and Fearless Award, where she talked about being a mean girl to her fellow Black actresses and how that experience shaped her. She stated in part, "I used to shrink in the presence of other dope women, used to revel in the gossip and rumors. I lived for the negativity inflicted upon sister actresses or anyone's whose shine diminished my own. I took joy in people's pain and tap danced on their misery. It's easy to pretend to be fierce and fearless because living your real truth takes courage." How do we make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and work to solve them when we have officials whom we elect to, in fact, make our problems their problems and work towards solutions when they are more interested in using their power and position to line their own pockets and reward their political friends? I'm not talking about Councilman Andre Sager. Let's make that clear. How do we do this? First, let's put away jealousy and envy. Let's put away competitiveness. Let's put away pettiness. Let's put away insecurity, and let's really come together and unite, because we know that we are stronger together than we are divided. We know how to do this. We have many examples in our history. Many of the names that we shouted out during the libations. People like Dr. Martin Luther King, our fierce leader of the civil rights movement. People like Malcolm X, Whether or not you agree with his tactics, he was a strong advocate for human rights and one of the greatest and most influential African Americans in history. People like Justice Thurgood Marshall, who successfully argued several civil rights cases before the United States Supreme Court before ultimately becoming a Supreme Court justice himself. Even as far back as the 1800s with Harriet Tubman, who worked to free slaves and was one of the leaders of the women's suffrage movement. And as you can see, the list can go on and on and on. But can you imagine if those individuals chose not to make our problems their problems and work towards a solution? Where would we be? I don't think most of us would be standing here in this room, would have had the opportunities that we've had, and would have accomplished many of the things that we've accomplished if those individuals in our past did not practice the principle of Ujima even before Kwanzaa was created in 1966. We also have local examples of this being put into practice. We have the New Family Foundation. We have the Brothers Organization. We have Teen Charity. We have many of our Black sororities and fraternities and many of our nonprofit organizations right here in the city of Paterson. But as we do this on an organizational level, let's also make sure that we exercise this principle on a personal level. For me, I believe that I put this principle into practice both professionally and personally. With regard to my professional life, I think that my life's work has shown what my commitment is. While many of my classmates in law school became attorneys to make a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with that, my purpose and my goal of becoming an attorney was to give back to my community, to empower people who too often felt powerless and helpless, to ensure that people in my community had adequate, competent legal representation when needed. I wanted to make a positive impact on the lives of others, be a role model, and be a source of inspiration. That was it. That was simple to me. All the positions that I held, all of the commissions and nonprofit boards I served on, I believe I was able to accomplish my goals through that work, and I continue to work towards those goals every day. One of the proudest moments in my life was when I was honored by a president of the United States. If you take a poor little girl like me from Paterson who, was born on Governor Street, who lived on 12th and Rosa Parks Boulevard and lived on North 3rd, Riverside projects, Grand Street projects. When I'm sitting in the White House and the president is uttering my name, it was surreal for me. This little poor girl from Paterson made it from the hood to the White House. So I don't say that because I don't do what I do for accolades and praise, but what it did for me is it cemented in me the belief that I made the right decision in choosing the career path that I chose. And I never looked back. I never regretted dedicating my career to public service. I didn't just practice that principle in my professional life, but I did so in my personal life. Personally, it wasn't enough for me to be successful. It wasn't enough that I was doing well. If I could help another sister or brother, I felt obligated to do so. If I had someone that I considered a friend who was in need, I felt a duty to lend my time, my skills, my talents, and sometimes my financial resources to help them in any way that I could. Again, making our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together. And I have to admit that sometimes this has backfired on me with regard to personal relationships, but I don't regret it at all, and I would do it all over again. And I continue to do it this day because I have faith in humanity. So the question for each of you is, how are you putting the principles of Ujima into practice? Ask yourself, am I doing the best that I can to ensure my family's well-being? And then ask yourself, outside of my family, how have I made my brothers and sisters' problems my problem? And lastly, ask yourself, how am I working towards a solution to those problems? Not just by my words, but by my actions. If we all ask ourselves these questions on a consistent basis, and we can answer them in the affirmative or in an affirmative way, I have no doubt that the progress and strides that we as a people have made over these past 50 years will be unmatched by the progress and strides we will make in the next 50 plus years. May God bless you and keep you, and let the principle of Ujima live within you forever.